Everything you know about the British Empire's collapse is wrong, because historians focus on World War battles while ignoring the financial suicide that actually destroyed the world's largest empire. They say Britain fell because of military defeats, decolonization movements, and the rise of American power after two devastating world wars that drained the nation's resources and manpower. The truth is, Britain committed economic suicide in 1925 when Chancellor Winston Churchill made a single monetary decision that guaranteed the empire's destruction within 25 years, regardless of any military outcome. By returning to the gold standard at pre-war exchange rates, Britain artificially overvalued the pound by 10%, making British exports uncompetitive and triggering a deflationary spiral that destroyed domestic industry, created mass unemployment, and forced the government into unsustainable debt levels that made empire maintenance mathematically impossible. This wasn't a gradual decline from external pressures, it was financial. Self-destruction through currency, policy that transferred Britain's wealth to foreign competitors while impoverishing the domestic economy that funded imperial expansion. In the next 11 minutes, I'll show you exactly how Churchill's gold standard decision in 1925 triggered the mathematical sequence that ended British global dominance, why the same currency policy mistakes are being repeated by modern governments today, and the 3 specific strategies you can use to protect your wealth when politicians make catastrophic monetary decisions that destroy national economies while claiming to restore financial stability. Step into the Bank of England's imposing threadneedle, street headquarters on April 28, 1925, where Chancellor Winston Churchill sat across from Governor Montague Norman, both men smoking cigars as they finalized the most economically destructive decision in British history. The air was thick with tobacco smoke and the weight of empire as Churchill, despite warnings from economist John Maynard Keynes that returning to gold at pre-war parity would be crucifixion on a cross of gold, signed the Gold Standard Act that artificially overvalued the pound by 10% against all major currencies. Norman, a mystical figure who believed gold standard discipline would restore Britain's moral fiber, had spent months convincing Churchill that currency strength equaled national strength, ignoring the mathematical reality that overvaluation would make British exports uncompetitive in global markets. Outside their oak-paneled meeting room, British industry was already struggling to compete with American mass production and German engineering efficiency. But Churchill's decision would make competition impossible by adding a 10% artificial cost to every British product sold abroad. The decision reflected Britain's psychological inability to accept that the war had fundamentally changed global economics. British leaders still believed they could maintain 19th century monetary policies in a 20th century competitive environment. Keynes had warned Churchill in writing that the overvalued pound would reduce the standard of living of every working-class family in the kingdom, but Churchill dismissed these concerns as academic, theorizing rather than practical warnings about economic mathematics. The tragedy was that Churchill understood military strategy brilliantly, but remained economically illiterate, believing that currency values were matters of national prestige rather than industrial competitiveness. The gold standard return wasn't just bad policy, it was economic warfare against Britain's own industrial base, making British coal, steel, textiles, and manufactured goods 10% more expensive than competitors while forcing domestic wages and prices to adjust downward through devastating deflation that would destroy the social cohesion necessary for empire maintenance. The gold standard devastation began immediately and accelerated with mathematical precision as British exports collapsed and unemployment soared from 8% to 16% within 18 months. Coal miners, the backbone of British industry, faced wage cuts of 25% as mine owners tried to maintain competitiveness against cheaper foreign coal. leading to the 1926 general strike that saw 3 million workers refuse to work for starvation wages, made necessary by Churchill's currency overvaluation. Margaret Thatcher's father, Alfred Roberts, watched his grocery business in Grantham struggle as unemployed customers couldn't afford basic goods, while across Britain, 2 million families faced destitution as the artificially strong pound made British labour unaffordable in international markets. The human cost was staggering. Shipbuilding employment fell by 60%, steel production declined by 40%, and textile exports dropped by 35% as foreign buyers chose cheaper alternatives, destroying the industrial base that had funded centuries of imperial expansion. Factory owner James Morrison of Manchester was forced to close his textile mill and lay off 400 workers because the overvalued pound made his products 10% more expensive than Indian and American competitors, while his workers faced homelessness because unemployment benefits barely covered rent. The mathematical brutality was undeniable. Every British product had to become 10% cheaper through wage cuts and deflation, or lose market share to foreign competitors who didn't carry the artificial currency burden. By 1929, Britain's trade deficit had exploded to 400 million as imports became artificially cheap, while exports became impossibly expensive, forcing the government to borrow heavily to maintain basic services. The empire's economic foundation crumbled as colonies began trading with cheaper suppliers rather than expensive British manufacturers, while dominions like Canada and Australia developed their own industries rather than importing overpriced British goods. Churchill later admitted the gold standard return was the worst decision of his career, but the damage was irreversible. Britain had spent 4 years destroying its industrial competitiveness, while competitors built market share that would never be recovered. Today's governments are repeating Churchill's exact monetary mistakes with central bank policies that artificially strengthen currencies while destroying domestic industrial competitiveness and creating unsustainable debt burdens. The European Central Bank's strong euro policy has created the same export disadvantages for European manufacturers that Churchill's gold standard created for British industry, while quantitative easing programs mirror the deflationary pressures that destroyed British wages and employment. Germany's export surplus comes at the expense of southern European countries, trapped in an artificially strong currency they cannot devalue, creating the same unemployment and social unrest that broke British society in the 1920s. The Federal Reserve's dollar policies maintain artificial strength through reserve currency status, while American manufacturing becomes uncompetitive against Asian producers, following the same pattern of industrial hollowing that preceded British imperial collapse. Brexit partially mirrored Britain's 1931 abandonment of the gold standard, a desperate attempt to regain monetary sovereignty after decades of destructive currency policy. But the damage to industrial capacity takes generations to reverse. Modern politicians, like Churchill, prioritize currency prestige over industrial competitiveness, believing that strong currencies demonstrate national strength, while actually destroying the productive capacity that funds government operations. China's refusal to artificially strengthen its currency follows the lesson Britain learned too late. Industrial competitiveness matters more than monetary prestige. The mathematics remain identical. Countries that maintain artificially strong currencies through central bank intervention systematically transfer their industrial capacity to competitors with more realistic exchange rates, eventually becoming unable to fund their military and social commitments through domestic production. Here's your 3-step strategy to protect your wealth when governments repeat Churchill's monetary mistakes and destroy their economies through misguided currency policies. First, diversify internationally. Before currency policies destroy your domestic economy, hold assets in countries with realistic exchange rates and competitive industrial policies rather than those prioritizing monetary prestige over economic mathematics. Switzerland, Singapore, and countries that maintain export competitiveness offer better long-term prospects than nations trapped in artificially strong currency systems that systematically destroy their productive capacity. Allocate 30–40% of your wealth to foreign markets that benefit from currency realism rather than currency fantasy. Second, own assets that benefit from industrial competitiveness rather than financial engineering. Stocks in companies that manufacture real products in countries with competitive exchange rates. Commodities that maintain value regardless of currency manipulation, and precious metals that historically preserve wealth when governments destroy their monetary systems through prideful stupidity. Avoid government bonds from countries pursuing strong currency policies that make their debt service unsustainable through industrial decline. Third, understand that currency strength without industrial competitiveness is temporary and ultimately self-destructive, and position yourself in markets and assets that benefit from productive capacity rather than monetary manipulation. The countries and companies that prioritize making things people want to buy at competitive prices will outperform those focused on financial prestige and currency strength. Churchill's mistake teaches us that governments will sacrifice their people's prosperity for monetary pride, but smart investors can protect themselves by understanding that industrial competitiveness determines long-term wealth, not currency prestige. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. Subscribe now, because next week I'm revealing the specific countries and investment strategies that benefit from currency realism while others destroy themselves through monetary vanity, the modern equivalent of abandoning the gold standard before your government forces you to suffer through their economic suicide.